Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're looking into a group from the San Fernando Valley, North Hollywood specifically.
The Vineland Boys.
Exactly. And on the surface, maybe a typical street gang, but their story. It's got some really surprising connections, doesn't it? Reaching way beyond the valley.
Oh, definitely. I looked over the source material you sent, the Wikipedia entry, and yeah, even just that short overview shows this clear path.
From what, like a local crew?
Right, to something much more complex. They got tangled up with some pretty major players, organized crime, both here and internationally.
Yeah, that's what we want to unpack today. Sort of pull out the key facts, figure out where they fit in the, the bigger picture of crime in SoCal and maybe elsewhere.
And dig into those links, the ones that aren't immediately obvious.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's start at the beginning. Where did the Vineland Boys actually come from?
Well, the source says January 1988, North Hollywood.
Okay, 88.
And interestingly, the founders, it seems they're former members or at least associates of the 18th Street Gang.
Oh, okay. So not starting completely from scratch. There's a link there already.
Right. Suggests a kind of lineage, maybe some know-how influenced how they started out.
And the name itself, Vineland Boys. It sounds almost, well, normal compared to their later activities.
Yeah, Vineland Avenue, apparently that's just where the original guys used to hang out, play football, that kind of thing.
Huh. A bit ironic given where things went.
It is. It grounds them in a specific place,
Yeah.
But yeah, the source shows the early days weren't just about kicking a ball around. They ran into trouble pretty quick.
With who?
A much bigger fish. The Mexican Mafia, La M.
Wow, okay. That's jumping right into the deep end for a new gang. How did that clash start?
The specifics aren't really detailed in this source, those early fights, but it does mention a really key event.
Which was?
1998. The murder of the gang's founder, Teddy Lopez y Alberto Ruiz.
Right, I saw that. Him and another member.
Yeah, killed by Mexican Mafia guys. Happened at a nightclub, Monterey Park. That's a major hit, taking out the founder.
You'd think that would either destroy them or start an all-out war.
You would, but that's not quite what happened, according to this.
No.
No. Instead of, escalating this huge feud, the Vineland Boys eventually ended up making an alliance with the Mexican Mafia.
Seriously? After they killed their founder?
Seems so. They essentially got pulled into the Serrano coalition.
Which is basically controlled by the Mexican Mafia, especially inside the prison system.
Exactly. So it's a pragmatic move, maybe. A shift from enemies to, well, subordinates almost. Driven by survival, perhaps mutual benefit down the line. Happens a lot in that world.
That is a fascinating twist. Really shows the power structure, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So by aligning with La M, becoming Serranos, they get what? Protection? Access to wider networks?
Presumably. Protection, yeah, and probably connections. Now, in terms of their own size, their turf, what does the source say?
Let's see. It mentions about 300 members. Approximate, of course.
Okay, 300. And mostly operating where?
Primarily the San Fernando Valley.
Right, so not enormous like some LA gangs, but definitely a solid presence in that part of the city.
Okay, now this is where, for me, the story gets really unexpected. The alliance is mentioned.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Armenian Power, okay, another LA group, but then the Abergil crime family. That's the Israeli mafia, right?
That's right. A major Israeli organized crime group. How does a Valley Street gang hook up with them?
Exactly. How does that happen?
Well, the source suggests this cooperation, specifically with the Abergils, started around 2000.
Okay. And what was the deal?
It seems the Vineland Boys were providing, local services, muscle, basically, territorial control.
For what?
For the Abergils' ecstasy trafficking. The idea was the Vineland Boys could help protect the operation on the ground, within their turf, maybe keep local cops looking the other way, or just provide manpower.
So the local gang acts as a sort of ground-level facilitator for an international drug ring.
Pretty much. It's a form of criminal networking. The Abergils have the international supply lines, maybe, and the Vineland Boys have the local control and the willingness to use force.
And Armenian Power. Similar deal.
The source links them to probably similar arrangements, finding ways to work together in the Southern California underworld where their interests overlapped. It just paints this picture of
globalization, but for crime.
Kinda, yeah. Local meets international, the lines get really blurry. A street gang from North Hollywood helping an Israeli mafia group sell ecstasy. It's not your standard narrative.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It really shows how these networks operate, driven by profit, needing specific skills or access.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness brings us to probably the most high-profile incident involving the Vineland Boys.
The murder of Officer Pavelka.
Yeah, Burbank police officer Matthew Pavelka, 2003.
That was huge news. It wasn't just treated as a local crime, was it?
No way. It sparked this massive law enforcement crackdown, Operation Silent Night.
Right. I remember the name. How big was that?
The source says something like 1,300 officers involved, federal and local. Huge scale.
Wow. And arrests.
Led to 23 arrests of alleged Vineland Boys members. It showed just how seriously law enforcement took the threat after an officer was killed.
And the killer himself, David Garcia. It was a big manhunt. Right?
Yeah, extensive manhunt, stretched down into Mexico. But the really big thing, the bombshell that came out of that whole investigation.
Well, a cartel connection.
Precisely. The Pavelka case, the source calls it notorious for revealing the Vineland Boys' direct ties to the Sinaloa cartel.
The Sinaloa cartel. Like El Chapo's organization, Mexico's biggest, most violent.
The very same. Suddenly, this San Fernando Valley gang isn't just linked to the Mexican mafia inside California or even the Israeli mafia for drug deals. They're connected directly to one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world.
That's a staggering connection.
Yeah.
From playing football on Vineland Avenue to links with the Sinaloa cartel.
It is. It completely changes the perspective on the group, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the fallout didn't stop there, did it? The investigation stirred up other things in Burbank.
Right. It also brought to light some serious local corruption.
The mayor.
The former Burbank mayor, yeah, Stacey Jo Murphy, arrested in connection with a cocaine case, as the source notes.
So it wasn't just the gang itself, but the investigation revealed potential rot within the city's leadership, too.
It suggests that, yeah, how these criminal networks can sometimes, weave their way into the fabric of a community, even affecting local politics. It highlights the kind of corrosive influence these groups can potentially have.
Man, it shows the challenge, right? It's not just arresting gangsters, it's tackling the whole ecosystem, including potential corruption that lets them thrive.
Definitely a multi-layered problem.
And have the Vineland Boys just faded away after all that heat?
Yeah.
The source mentions more recent activity.
Yeah, still active, it seems. It notes federal raids targeting them again as recently as February 2019.
2019,
Yeah.
okay.
Over 3 dozen associates arrested in those operations. So despite Operation Silent Night and everything else, they remain a concern for law enforcement.
Okay, so let's try and wrap our heads around this. We started with a local gang, Vineland Boys, North Hollywood, 88, spun off from 18th Street.
Right. Clashed with, then allied with, the Mexican mafia.
Yeah.
Became Sureños.
Then these really surprising international links emerge, allegedly working with Armenian power and the Israeli Abergil crime family on ecstasy trafficking.
Providing that local muscle and know-how.
Then the tragic Pavelka shooting, which leads to Operation Silent Night.
And the massive revelation of direct ties to the Sinaloa cartel.
Plus, uncovering local corruption in Burbank along the way. It's an incredibly complex web.
It really is. Local street gang, Mexican mafia, Israeli mafia, Sinaloa cartel, local politics. It shows how tangled these things can become.
It really does. It completely breaks down any simple idea of just local versus international crime. It's all potentially connected.
A very potent example of that interconnectedness. What seems contained can be part of something much, much larger.
So thinking about that web, this Valley Street gang connected to La M, the Abergil, Sinaloa, political corruption, what's the big takeaway? Does understanding these layers change how we should think about organized crime?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, what does it mean for, say, law enforcement strategies? If a local gang has these global ties, how do you even begin to tackle that effectively, both locally and internationally? It definitely makes you rethink things.
It certainly does. Food for thought.
Indeed. Thanks for digging into this today.
My pleasure. Fascinating stuff.